And then it was also, how do I help other people find jobs they love? So we have a career strategy division as well that works with people in terms of resumes, cover letters, prepping for interviews, figuring out what do I want to do with the skills that I have if I don't want to continue doing what I'm doing.
Thank you for listening to the Interesting People You Meet podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Newground Financial. Newground Financial is a full-service investment and insurance brokerage firm that specializes in employee benefit plans, corporate insurance, and retirement planning. Newground Financial serves the provinces of Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, PEI, Ontario, and Alberta. Find out more at newgroundfinancial.com. Thank you for liking, sharing, and commenting on the Interesting People You Meet podcast across all of your favorite listening platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. By doing so, you are ensuring that more great people just like you have the opportunity to hear from our guests. Thank you, and enjoy the show. Today, my guest is Jen Warrington of now the Fusion Group. So super excited to have you here, Jen. Jen is a fellow EOA member here in Atlanta, Canada with me, and that's kind of how we met and connected. So really great to learn more about you, your story, kind of what's hot, what you're up to, and we can go from there. Welcome to the podcast,
Absolutely.
Jen.
Thanks for having me.
Jen, you've got a journey from bilingual customer service representative to recruitment enthusiast, and that's quite fascinating. Can you pinpoint really a specific moment or experience that ignited your passion for connecting people and helping them finding fulfilling careers?
Yeah. So I started as bilingual customer service, moved into sales, was doing all the things. I actually moved to Toronto in 2004 for 2 years. And at that time, I actually worked for a financial advisor. And
Cool.
when I decided to move back home to Halifax, I went to a recruitment firm to look for work. They had a job posted. It was for bilingual customer service. And I went in and I met with a recruiter and went through all the questions that they take you through and walked through my resume and explained all of those pieces. And at the end of that, she said, you're a fantastic candidate, but I'm not going to put you forward. And the reason I'm not going to put you forward is because you're actually overqualified for the role and you'd be bored and you'd be gone in 3 to 6 months. And, I thought, I'd never used a recruitment firm before, didn't really know what to expect from an experience perspective. And while I respected that she could see that there was something different for me, I also was in a position of, I just moved home. I was staying at my mom's condo, sleeping on her couch. I wanted to work and I knew that I could do this job. And so she asked me just to trust her and trust the process a little bit, and she'd be in touch with me. And fast forward to maybe 3-4 weeks later, her branch manager from the staffing firm reached out to me and said, heard you had a great conversation, heard you had, opportunity and that we didn't put you forward for. We'd actually like to consider bringing you in to do recruitment sales for us. So come in and be the sales rep for the firm. And so I was like, sure, I'll do that. Great. We set that all up. And I was out business development and talking to businesses about their hiring needs and how we could potentially help. And I really enjoyed that because I loved learning about businesses. And then ultimately, I would take that business back to the same recruiter I had originally met with, and she would find the candidates for the role. And she ended up going off on a leave. And I was in a situation where I have a funnel and didn't really know what to do with it because there was no one to help find the candidates for those roles. So I asked them to teach me how to do both and manage both sides of the business. And I literally fell into it and flew by the seat of my pants to figure it out. And that was, it'll be my 18th year this year.
Nice. Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
You mentioned working with a financial advisor was a pivotal role for you, I guess, in your bio. What valuable lessons did you learn from that experience, and how does it contribute to shaping your approaches with relationship and recruitment now?
That's a great question. I was very fortunate that the financial advisor I worked for, it was like a random meeting. We had some conversation. He knew I was from Halifax, fairly new to Toronto at that point. And he said, I don't even know if this will work, but I'm willing to give it a try if you want to come in and, not be an EA, but but be part of kind of that process that he needed and try to create and figure out a role and have him deal with some of his clients. And so it was really a leap of faith of him and me and him trying to figure this out. He was a one-man show at that point and wanted to grow his business and needed that support. So he really took me under his wing. And I think, for me, it taught me about how to hone your work ethic and how to, interact with clients. Obviously, when you're dealing with financial information for individuals, and a lot of his clients were high net worth, really how to position yourself in those rooms and have those conversations. So he was not only a great leader for me to learn under, but he really became a really strong mentor that it really trickled into now how I'm trying to lead a team, which I had never had before. I was always an individual contributor in the roles that I had. And so I often take a lot of, again, it was 20 years ago this year that I moved to Toronto, but I take a lot from what I learned from him and just his approach to not only business, but how he was with his family and his friends and the members of the community and things like that. So it definitely was part of the foundation and the DNA as I matured through my professional career for sure.
Cool. That's great. About 3 or 4 years ago, you made the move to, fly solo and redefine recruitment Jen style. I love that.
Thanks.
Can you walk our listeners through sort of that initial process and kind of what that looked like?
Absolutely. So I worked for Manulife for 10 years. I was a recruiter for them, and I was responsible for multiple business units in the organization across Canada, sometimes into the US, depending on capacity needs of the team, and a little tiny bit of exposure to overseas. But I was there for 10 years. I was really content in the role that I did and really enjoyed what I was doing. I'd always wanted to be on my own. Like I really had always thought about how could I do this on my own, but as you start to get older and add in, children and marriage and mortgages and all of those things, I was like, I really don't understand how I could do that. And so, which was one of the things I loved about recruitment in the agency world, is because you learned about so many different businesses. And I think when you have an entrepreneurial interest, learning about businesses is really exciting. So I had always wanted to go on my own, but really I didn't push myself off the cliff. And Manulife went through a global restructure in 2020 after a number of acquisitions that they had gone through. And I was impacted as part of that global restructure. So I found out in February 2020, just before, COVID was happening. It was like, be careful when you travel, but there was none of this, like the world's going to shut down. So I found out in February of 2020 that the end of March was going to be my last day. And in that 6 weeks of finishing up with them and thinking like, what would I do next? And then everything happening with COVID, I thought I want to go on my own, and I want to do it in a way that takes the agency world that I originally started in and then takes the corporate world of recruitment, because they're extremely different. And how do I bring the best of both together and do it in a way that I love? And I just figured it out from my dining room table while the whole rest of the world was on lockdown and we weren't allowed out of our houses inside of that. And we launched officially in September of 2020 once the severance package that I had from Manulife expired.
Wow.
Yeah.
And as you did that, sort of, I think you had said with a LinkedIn profile and a notebook, what did that look like? Like, how did you develop your strategy for standing out in the industry? And sort of, I guess another one, which seems very true, although we don't know each other quite well, but what role did authenticity play in this process?
Oh, that's a great question. So so the laptop that I used when I worked for Manulife, obviously went back to Manulife at the end of my employment with them. And I didn't have a strategy, being completely honest, other than to be completely authentic and just try to leverage LinkedIn, because at that point, when I knew what I wanted to do, I couldn't go anywhere. And when I say I literally could not go and knock on doors to say, hey, this is what I'm doing, or can you help, or do you have a need? I couldn't. You weren't allowed at the end of your driveway at this point. So I thought, how do I be really authentic in terms of, this is why I want it to be different, and this is how I want to do it differently than what I've seen being done? Because I had a really unique perspective of, before I was going to businesses and saying, let me recruit for you, and this is what we can do, and this is our value. But then that flipped. And then when I went corporately, recruiters were approaching me when I was at Manulife and Eastlink before that to say, how can we help you with hiring? So I could see it from very different perspectives because I had been on both sides of the table. And then on the corporate side of things, you get to have a bigger seat at the table versus finding the talent. That's obviously crucial and very important, but I was part of the strategy inside of those things. So for me, it was, how do I just continue to leverage my relationships and be really transparent in, I'm going to give this a go. I'm going to figure it out as I go, because I'd never owned a business. And at that point, I had never even considered that I would have been someone that now has a team of 3 and is expanding to 6 and, in 2024 as a goal. I always thought it would be me, my laptop, and working from wherever and filling the roles. But as we continue to grow, I think to your point, through that authenticity was that a lot of individuals I had maintained relationships with over the years had come back and said, okay, I'm glad you're not, in a corporate setting now, because now I can use you in the company that I've moved on to, and so on and so forth. So I think for me, it was, this is who I am. I know I'm not for everyone, but I know that I have a really unique perspective on what I think is great for recruitment. And I do it very differently in the sense of I value the resume of someone's experience, but I really want to know who the person is so I can make a good match with an organization. And I'm more focused on that and then selling, if you will, that part or making that match to a potential employer and vice versa than just checking the boxes inside the resume. And I think I hit it at a really great time in terms of, unfortunately, COVID leveled the playing field for a lot of people, but organizations were struggling with, do we hire? Do we lay everybody off? If we lay them off, where do they go? And so that just started to feed, hey, Jen, what would you do in this situation? How did you deal with, could you look at some of these things for us? And then individuals saying, I don't want to go back to work. I lost my job. I want to do something different. And just having very open conversations and then finding the creativity in that to come up with some ideas of how to point people and organizations in different directions that until COVID, we never would have considered before.
Too bad. Have you always dreamt of being an entrepreneur? Did you ever think, was it in the back of your mind it was something you wanted to do before you were somewhat forced to do it, or?
Yep. I often say to my husband, and it's kind of a running joke, is that I have more notebooks with ideas and thoughts of things that I wanted to do even before I met him. So I would say probably by the time I was 2021, I didn't really follow a traditional path in terms of like post-secondary education and those pieces, but I always wanted to do something. And I think it was a bit of a restlessness of not knowing what I wanted to do. And I think it was it felt very intriguing to be able to learn so much about what business entailed inside of that, which is why when I did transition into recruitment through the agency world and I was learning about other businesses, that definitely was like, okay, someday I want to do this. I never thought it would be recruitment, to be quite honest. I didn't know what it was going to be, but the ideas that I've written down over the years, none of it ever tied to recruitment until, with 12, 13 years experience under my belt at the point that I lost my position with Manulife, it then became very natural fit. And then it was also, how do I help other people find jobs they love? So we have a career strategy division as well that works with people in terms of resumes, cover letters, prepping for interviews, figuring out what do I want to do with the skills that I have if I don't want to continue doing what I'm doing. And so for me, I can't imagine now doing anything else. I don't know why I didn't do it before, but it was that, Manulife was the catalyst and they were ultimately the ones that made the decision of, you're not going to be here anymore. And did I A, take another position, or B, did I try to figure it out on my own with, not that I didn't have guidance, but until we fast forward through being part of EO together and developing and what have you, there are mentors and people you can learn from available. I didn't have that in 2020 from my dining room table, right? My husband's not in business. He's in a completely different field. So we couldn't even really bounce ideas off of each other. It was figuring it out as I went. And I didn't have a plan or a strategy other than just to show up and be myself.
That's sometimes a good strategy though.
Kind of scary though when you say it out loud like that.
That's good. So you are part of the EO community. Some of our listeners, so hopefully some of our EO folks are listening to this. But how did you become part of that community?
So back in 2022, I engaged Dave Reynolds of the Ruminate Group to help me figure out, okay, what do I do with this? Like it's outside of the realm and range of what I thought was possible. And I wanted to get it right and I wanted to maintain that consistency. So Dave and I had been connected on LinkedIn, very high level conversations over, kind of the first year I had been in business. And I reached out to him and said, I'm looking for someone that can help me do the following, because I had been working off an Excel spreadsheet, a notebook, and my phone. And that's not sustainable great out of the gate, but it wasn't sustainable. So Dave and I worked together for the bulk of 2022. And through those conversations and what we were doing and what he was helping me to implement. So this could be not Jen, independent consultant, but actually Jen, an organization. He's like, I think EO might be something that's really good for you as well. And talked to me about, he's already been a part of it for a while. We talked a lot about what that could do for me in terms of just exposure to individuals that own businesses and multiple businesses and all of those things. So it sounded really intriguing to me. And I went through the process, and then being part of that community of people and seeing everybody has their hands in so many different things, and there's so many really amazing, it just sees that there's a lot to learn, but there's so much opportunity and things that we would never think of were possible. And so that's been really exciting for me, but just the relationships that come from it for sure are just absolutely incredible.
Have to agree. Yeah. I've been part of it now maybe for 8 months or more.
Okay.
It's just nice to be around other folks who are as crazy as us.
Well, I think we have so
Not
many
to say
ideas
anyone's crazy, but
no,
it's
well, we are. That's
you
fair.
feel part of a community that, yeah, it's nice, certainly nice to be part of that. I enjoy the learning and the learning days and whatnot are quite good. But just what's really unique too about our form group is we do have some EO and EOA members in it, which is kind of a neat mixture. So we get a little flavor of both levels.
Both sides. I mean, I think there's a uniqueness to being, again, we have multiple ideas. It doesn't mean it's for the business that you're in or what you're trying to do. So it's trying to harness all of that energy. And if you aren't around people in your day to day that do that, it's really hard to articulate it without feeling like you're crazy or like, what am I even talking about? Yeah. So I think when it comes to the EO piece, knowing that you've got a safe space and that you can talk to people and you can, I know you're networking in some ways, but I've never really felt like it's been that. It's just always felt like really open conversation, dialogue, and people are willing to help and say, read this book, listen to this podcast. Did you know about this conference? And I think that that's been really, really beneficial. I think the group you get put into in EO, like the micro group you get into, is crucial to your success in that. And I've been extremely fortunate with the group that I was first put in and I'm still in with. And nice. It's been a game changer over and above everything else that we've been doing.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
You've just rebranded.
Yeah.
And that's a lot. So can we talk about that?
It is. Yeah, absolutely. So we started as the Fusion Group back in 2020. And when we started as a Fusion Group, it was more of that I was bringing together the best of the both worlds that I had been part of for a really long time. And as we continued to evolve, and in the year 1 I hired somebody, year 2 I hired someone, and then year 3 I hired someone, so we're now a team of 4. And as we've continued to grow both on the recruitment side and the career strategy side, I had never done any actual marketing. I didn't have a strategy of how I'm going to grow this. It was all very organic and very natural and very referral based, which was amazing. But as we got to what is the next step going to be, and those were through conversations with Dave around what did Jen want this company to look like? Because now it's not Jen Independent Consultant. And having worked for Manulife for the 10 years that I did and having the exposure at a national and international level, I thought, can we start to take this outside of Halifax? And can we start to tap into those relationships that I have there? And how do we work that? So we decided to go through, a rebrand of how do we essentially execute and make it not, we're a boutique firm because we're 4 people, but we also have a really big presence, not only on LinkedIn, but through the networks that I've built over the years. So I engaged with a marketing consultant, and through the feedback, through the work we had done with her, was that no one recognized the name The Fusion Group. If it was hey, Nick, you need to hire someone, go to Jen Warrington. And I've been very active on my LinkedIn presence and have been for a very long time. So when she came back with the strategy and the things that she was putting together, she said, I think we need to leverage your name. I think we need to move away from the Fusion Group, and we don't want it to be Jen as one person as a company, but maybe we want it to be the Warrington Group versus the Fusion Group so that we can tie your name into what people are recognizing. And so that was weird for me at first because you kind of you don't want to use your own name type thing. But then as I started to go through the process with her, it was a very aggressive process in the sense that we have worked through this launch over the last 90 days in terms of full rebrand, in terms of our strategy, our logo. We're doing a new website, all of these things that will launch Monday, the 15th of January. And it was, again, it's an aggressive timeline of 90 days to do all of this and implement all the pieces to it. But it's been such a great learning experience that I have been able to embrace and say, okay, the fact is that people know my name as recruitment. And so to be able to, hone in on that and leverage that as we continue to go. And but I'm telling you, at the very beginning, she had said to me, there'll be a lot of heavy lifting and, it's going to make you feel like your brain's going to explode because I'm going to ask you all kinds of questions. And I thought, you're just going to ask me the questions. I'll tell you the answer and off we go. And now I'm like, oh my goodness, that was it has been very heavy to figure out Where do we execute? What do we do? What kind of information does she need from me that comes very naturally to me because I've been doing it for so long, but that we want the world to know in a different way so that we continue to grow and scale in that capacity. So I've learned a lot about marketing. I've learned a lot about myself. I've learned a lot about what I want the business to look like and the product and service we want to deliver to our clients. And I actually, at the beginning, was very resistant to use the Warrington Group as a company, but now I'm actually really proud of it. And I feel like it's going to give me something to kind of stretch to like live up to and make sure that there's a different level of brand integrity behind that, because it is in fact my last name that's tying into that. So it's been a lot in the last 90 days.
So you've learned a lot about yourself and a lot about where the direction you want to go. Do you mind sharing a couple of nuggets as to what you've learned about yourself and the direction you want to take the business?
Absolutely. So about myself, I would say that I have learned that I'm really good under pressure. I do better when there's a very tight deadline to get the right quality out that I need. I've also learned that imposter syndrome is a thing. You always hear it, and we've talked about it in different things. But I always felt like I was really confident with what I was doing because I had a lot of momentum behind me over the last 3 years. And now that we're at a point where we're going to put this out there, and again, it's now, I don't want to say that it's hiding behind the name The Fusion Group, because that wasn't it. But now that it's like it's Jen Warrington of the Warrington Group, that just feels very bold to me, that I started to question myself a little bit. Like, am I really this good at what I'm trying to do and what I'm trying to accomplish? So I had to learn a little bit about, working through negative voices. And I try to always be in a growth mindset. But there was a bit of a fixed limiting belief that was coming to the surface to work through. And then just really being able to go like, you are really good at what you do. And it's okay to say that. And it's okay to like put that out there and be authentic with that. And so it's really helped me hone the transparency on authenticity, that I tried to bring to it. From a business perspective, my big, they ask you in EO, what's your big, hairy, audacious goal? And my big goal was just that it was going to be just me, and that I could make a sustainable income, that I could replace my income at Manulife. And, I'm in the accelerator program, which means that I have not broken that $1 million revenue mark yet, but we are trending on that for this year, which is absolutely bananas to me. And that I have that team. So I know that I want to continue to scale it, and I want to continue to build it and have a national presence. Which that wasn't the idea when I sat at the dining room table in March of 2020 going, what do I do now that I don't have a job and the world is shut down? So I think it's just letting the universe take you where you go when you're starting to do the actionable things that you're doing and you're loving what that is and being able to move that forward. But I never imagined that this is where I was going to be, like not even in a million years. So learning about yourself to go, oh, okay. That is very different than what you thought. And you're either going to embrace it or you're going to walk away from it. And neither is the wrong thing to do, but just really being able to be confident in whichever way you decide to go is that you own that path and walk through it for sure.
Yeah. As you're scaling up that mountain to that income threshold, I guess that's set on EO and perhaps in your own mind, as you transition from being the practitioner to the business owner and continue to wear both hats, which you're probably still doing, how do you manage that? How are you managing that right now?
Some days not great. And I also have to be, open to knowing that not every day is going to be great. Right. And that there are going to be bumps. And I think when you're at the beginning and you do have momentum and it's like, this is great. And then I'm doing what I love and it's amazing. And at that point, being the technician in the business, right. And I was doing all the things, letting go of some of that ownership and responsibility to then bring other team members in. As you're going through all of those pieces, it can be really hard to balance all of it, but really being able to say, like, you have to have faith in the process and being able to trust the people that you surround yourself with. So whether it's, my micro group inside of EO that meets monthly, or whether it's the larger EO group as a whole, or the work that I do with Dave or some other mentors that I have, that, as you kind of start to see these things, you really have to be comfortable embracing them, because you really have no idea where this stuff can take you. And again, like if you had told me 3 years ago that we would be a company that's going to trend to 7 figures and, add more team members on all of that, I would have been like, that's absolutely insane. Like, that's not going to happen. I'm going to be happy being an independent consultant. And now I know that I want more than that. And I think that just comes with the evolution of all the things you learn over the course of the bumps and bruises that come along, because there are days that are hard. There are days where you think, okay, I'm going to sign a really big contract and that's going to set us up for X amount of time. And then that falls through and you're like, okay, wait, now I'm going from, feeling really good about things to having to go, how do I pivot and how do I, make the best of that stuff? Because it can feel lonely at times, no matter how many people you surround yourself with, or how much great information you have. It's when you get inside your own head and you kind of have a moment to pause that you can freak yourself out about some of the things that are happening. And I'm not just a recruiter, which is what I absolutely love to do. And I love helping companies find people and people find companies. But now it's like, you've got HR that you have to do with your own team. You've got legal, you've got admin, you've got marketing, but all of these things inside of it, which when you are entrepreneurial, it's very exciting to learn those things. But when one of those things isn't working very well and it's not your subject matter expertise, it can humble you very, very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems as though your conversations and work with Dave have been pivotal to some of your success here. So what made you reach out to him? Was it a previous relationship? And if so, you probably had to make a bit of an investment to do some work with him and his company.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for entrepreneurs who are in those early stages who might be going, I don't know if I could work with a Dave or a whoever because I got to pay him and all these types of things. It seems as though it's a good investment, however you look after that.
Absolutely. So I didn't know Dave before, but it was funny is that when you're on LinkedIn, you're making connections and you're reaching out and all of those different pieces. I had actually gone to high school with a guy by the name of Dave Reynolds. And at first I thought it was him. So I had kind of gone through it. I'm like, no, I don't think that's him. I'm not sure. And so I actually reached out and that was part of the conversation was like, did we go to school together? And Dave's 10 years younger than me. So we did not. And as I was looking at his profile, we had some conversations. I had just seen some of the work he had done. He had been in telecommunications. I had been with Eastlink before. So we kind of had some commonalities. And I had invested in a previous business coach, probably late 2021, I think. And it wasn't working really well and I wasn't getting what I needed. And so I reached out to him and said, like, I just want to ask you if it's what I'm looking for in terms of how do I take this from paper to a system that I can grow and be better organized with on my own day to day. Because at that point I hadn't hired someone else to be on my team. And I was like, does this exist? Or am I just like, I'm struggling to find it. And so we had a really great chat and then he presented how he could support me. And I think Dave is one of the smartest people that I've ever met. Like he's super smart and his personality is obviously very engaging so that you can feel that sense of trust when you're having those conversations. And I knew that I needed someone that was going to help like teach me and help me to grow and learn because I had never done this before. And David had larger teams and he had been responsible for ridiculous amounts of revenue in previous roles before he went on his own. But I also knew that I needed someone to hold me accountable. And I think as an entrepreneur, again, there's all these things happening all the time. Like I know there's 20 things in 10 different buckets that I need to do later, but it was really good for me to have someone that was confident enough in if you follow the system, it's going to work, but also confident enough to say, okay, I can be a big personality and I know that, but he was really great at being like, I'm going to hold you accountable to this. And I'm going to check in when I need to check in. And I'm going to call you out when I need to call you out so that you can grow and actually tap into making me see what else was possible. And then to buy into like, how do I do that? So I think if you're an entrepreneur and you get to the point where you make it through your first year because you're figuring out all of the things, I think it's critical that you invest in someone. I think it has to be someone that you align with very much like when we're doing recruiting, it's going to be a fit. And I think I've had a lot of trust because Dave was very honest and upfront with me. Like, he's like, it's not going to be easy. You're going to have days where you want to quit, but you can do it. And so for me, it was, how do I not make that investment? Like, I couldn't really at that point say, I could keep doing what I'm doing and that's great. But it started to spark, okay, there is more possibility to what the big goal was that I had already achieved. And having that transparent and frank dialogue. And he holds my feet to the fire every week, or he'll be like, you didn't do this, or we said we were going to do that. Let's bang it out. And he'll check in on a text message and what have you. So you need to have someone who almost is as excited about the success of what you're doing as they are about their own stuff, right? Inside of that. And I don't know how easy that is to find with people, because again, we're all trying to grow businesses and build and things like that. And we need the people to come in and do the product or the service or the coaching. But someone who is like, I really feel like when I win something and I share it at home with my husband or the kids, mostly my husband, because the kids are, younger and stuff, like they're excited, but to have someone external to that gets excited for you, that just, I feel like, gives you continued momentum and helps you to go, okay, like let's keep going with that. And he gives that to me in terms of the coaching relationship that we have. But he also calls me out on the things when I don't do them.
Nice.
Yeah.
Circling back to the work and your passion, reflecting on your experiences, what's the most important piece of advice you'd give someone starting their career journey, especially if they're unsure about the path or their passion?
That's a great question. I think my advice would be, you have to be okay with it not being the right thing when you start, right? Like if I look back at, like, just on my LinkedIn, like, I started as bilingual customer service. I went into contact center. I worked for a financial advisor. I did sales. Like there's so, like, you're going to get to the right point, but you have to really be okay with, if something isn't the right fit for you and you know that, how do you make a plan to exit that so that you can, and take the experience that you gain from that? There's something good in every great job and every not great job that you have to get you to the right point. And to have the confidence to know that you just have to, like, make a plan. And we can say, well, that's easy to make the plan, but how do you execute on that? And I think, having tough conversations with yourself, or being able to have someone objective that you can talk to. Me being a business owner, again, like we talked about, was something I always wanted to do, didn't know in what capacity, but to be able to then start to have confidence in myself. Every single job that I've had in my entire life, in some capacity, led me to be able to do this. So I think when people are starting out, you might think you want to be an accountant and then figure out, like, that's not actually what I love. I actually want to go into sales. I want to go into marketing. That's okay. And we as a society have never been taught that it's been okay, because if you think about it, we went to school, and if you didn't get a good grade, you failed, you were not smart, right? Or if you didn't go to university, you weren't going to be successful. Like, that's not true anymore, right? So I think we need to look at, you're not really failing. You're just finding your way forward, and you're always going to take something that, whether you deem it a failure or not, you're going to be able to take something forward with that and really try to find a way to hone in on what are the things that you like. Like, I feel like I'm great at building relationships. I'm not great at the admin side of my business. Like, I don't like to come and sit down and, fill out the paperwork or do the things that I need to do. But I know that those are parts of the business that need to be done. But if I hone in on the relationships and having the right conversations, then that part comes really easily and energizes me. So when I do have to come in and do that, then I can get it done because I know that I've been able to see the outcome. So don't take anything that you're doing as, if it doesn't work out, that's terrible. I think we have a lot more runway than we used to when it comes to changing directions, when it comes to a career. And as a recruiter, when we would look at someone's resume 5 or 10 years ago and they only were somewhere for 2 years, we consider them job hoppers.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a flag. That's not the case anymore. If you get someone in a job 2+ years now, that's like, okay, they're solid, they're stable, because COVID changed a lot. And there's no one in the world that wasn't impacted by COVID in some way, right? And now there's so many career opportunities, and there's still so many more to come that we don't know about, that it's okay to learn and pivot. And I saw a quote that said, pivoting isn't quitting, it's changing direction. And it's okay to do that. And I think more people just need to be softer with themselves and say, you know what, maybe I did spend X amount of dollars on a university degree to do accounting, and I actually want to do sales and marketing. What did you learn from that you can take over here that will add value? And someone's going to walk you through it and help you learn. Because no matter what you do, even if it was accounting, if you were at one firm and you went to a different firm, the way they do certain things might be different. You're still going to have to learn. So just always know you're learning, and nothing's a failure. You're going to be able to take something with you and leverage that, and you'll find something that you really can be passionate about and excited about. And then you don't feel like you're working.
There's probably a lot of people, hopefully at some point listening to this conversation, wondering, should I reach out to Jen and get some help from her and
Sure.
or her team? And I think maybe the best way to ask the question would be, you're committed to helping others and you love what you do. So can you share a couple maybe specific stories where you've witnessed someone's life significantly change because of the opportunities you help them find?
Yeah, absolutely. I have 2 that are my favorites. So the first one is a gentleman who was a pastor in a church. And for those that have followed along in any capacity of anything I've done over the last 3 years, it's a story I tell that they're probably like, oh, she's going to tell that story again. But he was a pastor in a church. He had been a pastor for 20 years. So he had his theology degree and his master's in divinity. His father was the pastor of the church for the 20 years before him. So as I got to know him, the joke was like he was conceived with the idea that this was going to be his career path, right? Like that was his whole life forever. And he wanted to leave and he wanted to do something different. And one, he was dealing with the, like, you're stepping away from like the family, right? And what their plan was. And you also don't know, like he said, like, what do I do with a degree in theology and a master's in divinity? And as we got into who he was and what he was doing and all of those pieces, and we started to pull out areas of his role and what he was responsible for, you could see there was so much more to him and what excited him, and as well as the responsibilities. Because you think of a pastor and you assume that they do Sunday service and they're working in the community. But really, when you started to get into all of those other pieces, he had very director level, general manager type skills in terms of, finances and organizational management and leadership and all of these skills that you wouldn't necessarily notice inside of that. And so as we were pulling all those things out and starting to inspire some confidence and starting to come through with a strategy of how do you go forward with that, he was making as a pastor under $30,000 a year. That's their annual salary. He has now just crossed the 2-year line with a company who was not a client of ours, although I said to him, if you don't get this job, I can place you in a heartbeat, 100%. But he's now a director of operations in a completely different industry, obviously anything would be. And we negotiated a first-year salary for him at $90,000.
Wow.
Yeah. And so we
Cool.
worked together for 6 weeks and gone through all the steps, like how do you have a resume that translates into corporate world and how do you prepare for an interview and all of those things. And so we had done that. So that was a huge one. That was the really first big win that I had where I was like, okay, this is not just me writing a resume for somebody, right? Inside of that. So that was a really significant win. And then we had, last year, we did quite a bit. We did some community calls in the sense of, I'd go on LinkedIn and say, okay, Thursday mornings, 9:00, come on, ask questions about how to use LinkedIn. How do you answer this salary question in an interview? Whatever those kind of things were that were keeping you up at night as a career seeker. And so we had Thursday morning calls for almost a full year. And there was a lady that joined. And at the beginning, we've always said, like, you don't have to participate if you don't want to. You can observe. You don't have to have your camera on, like wherever you're comfortable inside of that. And she observed for probably 4 weeks. And then she came on and she said, I work in a situation where like everyone's telling me like lower your salary expectations. You're not going to get this job because you don't have X, Y, and Z. And she said, I really want to know what your thoughts are on that. And that's where it comes to me being like authentic. And, again, I'm not for everybody. I was like, but I think that's bullshit. Like, I totally think that you stick to your money number and you learn how to articulate what you do bring to the table, because I think it's very unique. And then she started asking questions like, how do I do this on my LinkedIn? Or how do I answer a question when I want a $75,000 salary and they only want to pay me a 50? And so we started having some really great conversation. And every week she showed up. And then, so she was 4 weeks really silent, probably about 4 or 5 weeks where she was really engaged. And then she messaged me privately on LinkedIn and said, there's a company that I've wanted to work with for the last 2, maybe 3 years. And she said, I made the changes to my LinkedIn that you said I should do. I networked the way that you kind of had suggested. And she said, the executive director has actually reached out and they want to talk to me tomorrow. And like, now I'm freaking out kind of thing. And so we walked through a little bit of that. And then I said, let me know how it goes after your call tomorrow. And they offered her a position on the call. And it ended up being for like $75,000. And it ended up being that they like fast tracked her hire and all this stuff. It was like just a really great story because they were a target company she wanted to work for. And so I asked her in a couple of weeks when she kind of had settled in and all that, if she would come back to the call and share that, because we had a lot of people that frequented and that was kind of becoming a community in that sense. So she came back and I said like she was going to share her story and kind of how she took the advice and made it work. And she actually said like, I'd like to read a letter. And she wrote a letter and she read the letter on the call, to which everyone was in tears, because what nobody knew was that she was 2 weeks away from her unemployment running out and was on food stamps and was going to the library every day to use the internet to try to find work, and was being told no, being told no, being told no. And then was in a situation where she's like, I'm going to be able to buy a car to drive my kids to school and to put them in activities and things like that. So that was also a very similar feel to like the outcome for Mike, because it was a really big win, who was the pastor that we worked with. But just like those things start to validate that when you have the right knowledge and you're really passionate about what you do, and you can start to share that with other people and they take that and run with it somewhat enthusiastically. Sometimes it's not like they don't want to do some of the things you share with them, but the outcomes for that, like a win when you're changing careers, like, or changing jobs, is like a $5,000 to $10,000 salary increase. So when we're going from like EI and food stamps to $75,000 a year and $30,000 a year to 90, like we're significantly making an impact for someone that, like, I don't take that lightly, but I'm also so humbled when people are like excited to share how small, like, she didn't engage in actual paid services with the team. She just followed along what we were saying and
Wow.
took stuff off of LinkedIn. So that was really, those would be the two massive wins I've had. And we've had, again, it's not to discount any of the other wins we've had, whether it's hiring for businesses or the people we've worked with, but those are the ones that, you know, you can really make big changes and you don't have to be stuck somewhere that you don't feel like you want to be, and that you've learned enough stuff to carry it forward and do the right things for yourself and, you know, start to make some life-changing money. Because in those two situations, that's exactly what it was.
Mm-hmm. You've made personal career changes and coached many to do the same.
Yeah.
I guess as we end out here, what would you put on a billboard if the billboard company, we won't name it here in town, gave you a free one for a month to put down on Barrington Street or something like that?
What would I put on there? You ask really good questions, Nick. Like, they're really good. I think I would put up there that regardless of what it looks like we create paths where other people see walls. And so where you might think you can't, you know, get the job you want or negotiate the salary, or you're not going to do well in an interview, or you don't even know where to start if you're a business and you need to hire, whatever that is, we remove that kind of barrier of like, I'm stuck and I don't know where to go. And so I'd say the tagline that I actually have on my LinkedIn, which is we create paths where others see walls, like, that's 100% what I want to do every day when I get up. And I don't think anything is impossible, because me sitting here on paper wouldn't make any sense for the twists and the turns and the things that I've done to where I am today. But obviously all of those things brought me to the right spot.
Awesome. Well, I love your energy, your optimistic view. Congratulations on all your success so far. And I look forward to watching you crush your goals here in 2024 and seeing you more around the EO community.
Absolutely.
Is there anything else you'd like to leave us with? Perhaps we'll ask where can our listeners find you and that type of thing.
Absolutely. So we are the Warrington Group .ca from a website perspective. I'm on LinkedIn all the time. I'm very, very active on that platform. So even just to connect, if you want to kind of watch from the sidelines and seeing what we're doing, because I put out thought leadership content, but we also post the jobs that we're hiring for on behalf of our clients. So LinkedIn is a really active platform for us and the website. And, you know, we're hoping to become more and more involved with the community in different types of events and be around that and be a staple at those. So I think that, you know, I would encourage anyone that might see myself or members of the team anywhere that want to have conversation to definitely approach us and have that dialogue. But if it's from a computer or a phone right now, like, LinkedIn would be the best place over and above the website.
Incredible. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see you next week at one of those joint events that we're collaborating on. That's very exciting. We look forward to seeing you there. So thanks for joining us on episode 41 of the podcast. Jen, amazing to chat with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.